I lived in Menifee, California for about 3 years. During that time I went to the local high school, and let me just say a lot of crazy stuff went down while I attended. One time, a library employee showed up to school very early in the morning and shot herself in her car. The body was discovered during second period. What creeps me out most of all was that I passed by her car while walking to school that morning, and I didn't even notice. Another time, an undercover cop posing as a student was able to identify kids that were selling narcotics, and a huge drug bust ensued shortly after. Strangely enough, on that same day that happened, while I was walking to school, some guy I knew asked if I wanted to buy pot off of him, which I wisely declined. Later on, I saw that same guy get arrested and escorted out of the classroom. The event itself closely mirrored the film 21 Jump Street. Pretty awesome. However, the one event that was probably the biggest and shook the entire community was the disappearance and death of a local boy named Terry Dwayne Smith Jr. The tragedy happened during the summer after the 2013 school year. I didn't know who the boy was, but I did know his older brother Skylar. I knew Skylar from school. He was in my first period English class at the time. I didn't talk to him much, even though he sat near me, but on the times that I did say a word to him, he was friendly. He came off as a little odd, but I personally didn't think he was really that strange. He had his own group of friends that were all easy to get along with. Something of note that happened earlier on in that school year was a confrontation he got in with another student. I remember hearing about how one guy said something offensive to Skylar, which greatly angered him and erupted into a fight. The kid's front tooth got knocked out. At the time it seemed funny to everyone else, but it was an indicator of how far he'd be willing to go when it came to getting agitated. On to the main story. After school ended that year, I spent most of the summer just hanging out with my trio of friends. One day I was in my room doing nothing of interest, so I decided to go on Facebook. While on there, Tyler posted something that appeared on my news feed. He said his little brother had gone missing and was urging his friends to be on the lookout for his whereabouts. I found it pretty unfortunate, but thought the kid would probably be found the same day. Either the same day or the next, I forget which, I happened to be watching the news, and the number one topic was the disappearance of a boy named Terry. A picture of him was then put up. On closer examination, I noticed he was the same boy that Skylar had posted about earlier. Apparently, the situation had gotten dire, and the brother's mother, Shauna, had called for a group effort to go and search for the boy. As the days went on, more and more people went out in search of young Terry. I believe Skylar made a few more posts about it, but I could be wrong. Eventually he was made a suspect and was taken into custody by the police because he was the last person to see Terry alive before he went missing. I remember hearing about how a lot of his friends were in denial and disbelief. To them, he could never do such a thing. Since I personally didn't know Skylar that well, I couldn't really pass judgment at the time. While in custody, Skylar changed his story several times about his last encounter with his brother. His main one being that they were home alone, and he decided to leave and go hang out with his friends, and that supposedly Terry followed for a while, until Skylar told him he couldn't tag along, and ordered him to return home. This set the theory that Terry was probably abducted by someone that night. Finally, after several days of searching, Terry's body was eventually discovered behind the family home under a tree in a shallow grave. The general consensus at the time was that Tyler did kill him for unknown reasons and tried to bury him. Some even thought that the mother was in on it because she was still in defense of Skylar, who was then charged with the crime. Shauna acted pretty strangely, saying that Terry had autism and that supposedly at first she didn't let the cops investigate her property. After the corpse was discovered, the huge search party was promptly called off, and a candlelight vigil was held for Terry. In the aftermath, a lot of drama ensued. Terry's father came into town from the other side of the country and claimed that his ex-wife had lied about their son having autism and demanded to take his body back with him to be buried in his local area. He even sued Shauna for a large amount of money. I think it was for child negligence or for emotional distress. The two even appeared and debated on the Dr. Phil show, but nothing came out of that besides everything everybody knew. Since at the time Skylar was a minor, he wasn't charged as an adult. He was found guilty of manslaughter, but was offered a plea deal, the details of which have not been released to the public. Apparently what actually happened was that the brothers were roughhousing when Terry accidentally got killed. Their mother later suggested something like the boy hitting his head on the corner of a table or something. In a panic, Skylar tried to bury him in the backyard. What was strange was that knowing what had happened, Skylar still went to Facebook and asked for help in searching for his brother, instead of just confessing. Skylar was sentenced to 12 years and will stay in juvenile detention until he's 23. Overall, this was pretty tragic, and it's crazy how one day I was talking to someone in class, and the next he's on the news for the murder of his own brother. This story isn't mine, it's my father's. He told me this when I was around 14 years old. When my dad was young, he grew up in a sketchy area of town. A lot of druggies, but mostly elderly on welfare. This story takes place in the 70s. At an early age, my father wandered the disheveled country town often without supervision, which was a common occurrence back then. When my dad was around 9, he was riding his bike along the country roads and came up on a local pond which was surrounded by dense forests. My dad, being the little adventurer that he was, got off his bike and made his way towards the swamp. He stopped dead in his tracks when he noticed a short, elderly man sitting along the bank of the water. The man had a net in the water and seemed to be spending his time fishing on the warm summer day. My dad was a fearless boy due to being raised with 5 siblings, so he knew how to look out for himself. However, he tended to be a bit of a prick, which landed him in bad situations. So he dropped his bike and jumped into the murky water, fully clothed. This caused ripples to be sent throughout the small pond, which ended up splashing the old man in the process. My father thought the elderly man wouldn't care and would laugh it off due to the intense heat. However, when my father turned around to meet the man's gaze, he was shocked to see a stone expression with bulging gray eyes staring intensely at him. Since my father jumped off a small ledge, a little ways from the road, he had to swim towards the shore, which would make him have to pass this man. He awkwardly made his way towards the shore, trying to avoid the man's gaze. When he reached the shore, he was dumbfounded when the man grasped his wrinkled hands around his shoulders. My dad shuddered as he turned towards the old man. The man's expression was haunting. His gray eyes were dull and seemed dead, and his lips curved into a chilling grin. He grabbed my father and started dragging him into the water. My father struggled, but was no match for the man's strength. The man stopped pulling when they were both waist deep in the water. Before he knew it, the man pushed him under the murky water. He gasped, but was met with water filling into his lungs. He started grabbing at the man and trying his best to resist. He felt like he was under for hours, but it was only minutes. The man suddenly let go. My father burst through the water and started gasping for air. The old man simply walked back to the shore, grabbed his supplies, and walked towards the road, leaving my father standing there in the middle of a pond gasping for air. My father never told his family about his experience because he was afraid that he was in the wrong. He's now 47 and still dwells on this experience from time to time. What my father did was rude at best, but it didn't warrant the reaction that it did. Even though the man is probably dead by now, it still brings chills down my spine that my father almost died by his hands. I'm a 19-year-old male from Norway. It was a summer night last year, and I was home alone for the weekend. My sister was in Rome with her boyfriend, and my parents were in Oslo working. I had a very bad hangover from the night before, so I decided to go to bed early. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and turned off all the lights in the house. I didn't lock the front door because I never felt like it was necessary. The crime rate in this small town is extremely low, and nothing usually happens around here. I went to my room, opened my windows for some fresh air, and jumped right into bed. Moments after I fell asleep, I suddenly woke to hearing a few loud and terrifying screams. It sounded like a man in pain or something. The screams came from the house next to mine. I don't know who owns the house, but I knew that the basement apartment was being rented out. I immediately ran to check if the person was okay. The scream was so horrible, and I knew something was wrong. The door was closed, but all the windows were open. I did not hesitate to press the doorbell. I stood there for maybe 40 seconds, but no one opened. At this moment I was very worried, and I was just about to call the police when the door opened. It was a weird-looking guy, who appeared to be in his mid-30s. The first thing I said was, "Are you okay? I heard loud screams coming from your house." He answered pretty fast and said, Sorry about that. I had a rough night, and I just got a phone call which upset me. Nothing to worry about, but thanks for caring." I was very relieved and told him goodbye. Right before I started walking back, he asked me if I wanted to come in for a beer. I was so tired and I had to go to work in the morning, so I told him we could do it another time. I went to bed again, and a long story short, I woke up the morning after, went to the kitchen and made myself some bacon and eggs for breakfast. After my breakfast, I got ready for work. Just as I went outside to my car, I saw 5 police cars at the neighbor's house. It was very confusing, because I was just there last night, and I just had to know what was going on. I approached a police officer and asked him what had happened. The police officer said, "There's been a homicide. The homeowner was found decapitated in the kitchen." I was in shock, and before I could answer, he showed me a picture of the man I had spoken to last night. The officer asked me if I had ever seen that man around here. I replied, "Yes, I spoke to him last night. I heard screams and checked on him. He was upset about something." The police officer got big-eyed and told me, "Sir, he's not the homeowner. It's the guy we're looking for. He was the one who did this." It felt like my heart was gonna explode. I started sweating and hyperventilating. The police asked me some questions about the night before, and then I rushed to work. On my way to work, I started thinking about what would have happened if I would have gone inside that house. I'm just so grateful nothing happened to me. Luckily, the guy was found, and he got life in prison. I'd like to preface this with some quick info about my dad and where we live. My dad is a big, scary-looking dude in his late 50s. He has a well-trimmed beard, a shaved bald head, and he is big. That being said, he's a big softy, one of the friendliest people I know. We live in a small fishing town in Maine. A lot of the locals, if not normal, are either rich old people, sailors and/or fishermen, or bored students on drugs. It's a very peaceful town where crime barely happens, and everybody, even the kids on drugs, is generally friendly, if not a bit standoffish. About half a year ago, I realized how quick to anger my dad is when it comes to driving. While he was driving down this long, twisty, dangerous road that connects the islands together, a tourist with an expensive-looking car was tailgating us like he wanted us to speed up, despite the fact that we were already going a little over the speed limit. My dad, not taking too kindly to this, stopped his car at the first chance he got, telling my mom he was going to have a chat with this asshole. My mom quickly convinced him that it wasn't worth it, so my dad settled for flipping off the dick and letting him pass. The second time something like this happened, we were at Walmart. It was just my dad and me at the time. Driving around the parking lot, we were cut off by a younger driver. The man, somewhere in his 20s, decided to flip us off, even though we were in the right-of-way. My dad, tired from a long day, and not so pleased that he and his child were being so rudely insulted, started tailing this guy. It didn't hit me until afterwards how scared this guy must have been. We followed him around for a good few minutes, and he was making turn after turn trying to lose us. My dad eventually gave up the chase so we could get our Walmart shopping over with. I know for a fact that my dad means no harm whatsoever. He really does just like to talk to them. They don't know that though. It worries me to think that more likely than not, this wasn't the first few times something like this has happened. I'm afraid that my dad one day would end up in a video like this one, or worse, on the news as yet another victim of road rage. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you would like to read some more information on the first story, make sure you check the description for links to the news articles. I appreciate everyone checking out this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.